almost heaven.
Thanks for tuning in. Before I get going, I'll go ahead and warn you now, there are spoilers in this, so if you haven't seen the movie Alien Covenant and you plan to see it, you may not want to watch this review, but if you're one of these people who doesn't care about spoilers, well, hey, keep watching. Just got back from Alien Covenant, and how does it stink? Let me count the ways. Oh, man, I was disappointed. Look, if you've watched my earlier videos, pew, 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 wherever those things show up, if you watch those earlier videos, and if you haven't, go ahead and take a look at them now, you know that I'm a Ridley Scott fan. I've loved everything he's done. Prometheus, when I first saw it, I thought, it wasn't great, but then I saw it a couple of times after that and started to really love that. So I'm kind of having the same reaction with Alien Covenant that I did after first seeing Prometheus, and that is, wow, I wish I hadn't spent the money to see it in the movie theater. This would have been just as good watching it at home. So the plot is basically this. You've got this colony ship with thousands of colonists in cryo-freeze and hypersleep, basically, in a big cargo storage hold, along with a bunch of embryos. Now, why the embryos are there, I have no idea. The whole time I was scratching my head. I'm a scientist. And why you would send along embryos, it really makes no sense to me. The whole point is you're sending colonists who are, a lot of whom are mating pairs. Why do you want to saddle a colony with little embryos unless it's some sort of a backup, maybe, is the best I could come up with. But that was never explained. And so during the whole movie I was thinking, here's this colony ship, thousands of colonists, thousands of embryos, a crew of maybe 10 people, I can't remember exactly how many. Why are those embryos there? I kept thinking about that through the whole movie. It was never explained, or if it was, I missed it somehow. So partway through the journey, they have an accident, basically. The details don't really matter. They have an accident, and the character Tennessee, played by Danny McBride, and who is fantastic. One of the things I wish is that there was more of Tennessee in this movie. He's in there a bunch, but he's not as much as I kind of would have liked him to be. But anyway, so Tennessee goes out to repair it, and while he's out there, he intercepts this transmission that's kind of fuzzy, and it turns out it's a transmission from Prometheus, Elizabeth Shaw. And so the crew gets together and decides, you know what, we're going to go in that direction where the transmission come from and explore that planet, because somehow magically they were able to follow this transmission back with their sensors and determine that it originates several weeks' journey away on a planet that's perfect, even better than the planet they were originally intending to go to. I don't know how you do that from that far away, but they were able to do it, and they decided to go to that planet and check it out, see where the transmission originated from. So to make a long story short, they wind up on this planet, which is the planet you see in some of the trailers where David bombs it with that black goo, and what you think are engineers basically wind up being killed, fried by this black goo, and then it becomes your typical, there are a couple of creatures, but mostly it's about David and how, he's been stranded on this planet. The fact of the matter is he killed Elizabeth Shaw. And it's about David and how he's crazy and how he wants to basically kill humanity and prevent humanity from colonizing throughout the universe. All right, first of all, let's start out with the beginning of the movie. The beginning of the movie, it really, really kind of sets the scene for what's going to happen, and you start to really get sucked in and you begin to think, oh, this is going to be fantastic.
This is wheat. What are the odds of finding human vegetation this far from Earth?
Who planted it? What happened here? I need you back here right now. I need you.
Okay, baby, just calm down, sweetheart. Calm down.
Tell me to calm down.
You're breaking up.
This is going to be awesome. I love the story and plot so far, right from the opening. Now, if you haven't looked online and seen all of the previews and trailers and stuff for Alien Covenant, I highly recommend that you go and watch all of those before you see the movie. Otherwise, you don't get the backstory. None of the stuff that shows up, well, I shouldn't say none. A lot of the stuff that shows up in the trailers online on YouTube doesn't actually make it into the movie and actually provides some backstory that helps you understand as you go along. If I had not seen that stuff on YouTube, might not have picked up as quickly as I did. Ridley Scott was not kidding when he said that artificial intelligence is the enemy in this part of the franchise and not necessarily the creatures. And to me, that's a cop-out. And look, this is an Alien movie. It's not a David movie. It's not a Walter movie. It's not an Ash movie, right? I mean, the whole point of Alien are the aliens. And the whole point of Prometheus were the engineers. And so that kind of like ruined it for me in the sense that, you know, the times that there were creatures in the movie, it was really, really, really cool and really exciting and you were on the edge of your seat, but they never really kind of grew that into the movie itself. The movie was definitely not about these people trying to fight for their lives and survive in the face of all of these, you know, this onslaught of alien beings, whether it's the neomorph, which is what grows in the body after you inhale these spores or get these spores inside you, or the xenomorph, which is the classic kind of alien creature, right? It just didn't work for me. There's this scene where Walter is kind of a good android, and he's David's counterpart. And there's this scene where this realization comes where Walter realizes that David is going to kill the crew of the Covenant, or try and prevent humanity from colonizing the universe, and he suspects that he's going to do it using these alien creatures that David has spent, you know, the last 8 years trying to perfect and engineer. And there's a fight. David winds up stabbing Walter through the neck, and you think that Walter is out of the fight and dead, but then a few minutes later he comes back, and you see where his wound is self-healed. And David is surprised, and Walter, who is a later model than David, says, yeah, well, there have been a few upgrades since then. So basically, Walter heals himself. There are self-sealing and self-healing wound repair capabilities on the later models of androids. Well, you know what it turns out, and this is a major spoiler, it turns out that David then winds up killing Walter and tries to take Walter's place and brings with him a couple of alien face hugger embryos that he's swallowed and put in his stomach. Somehow he manages to impregnate one of the surviving crew members that Tennessee comes and rescues. They get up to the main ship. That surviving crewmate ends up having a chest burster come out, one of the classic xenomorphs. The xenomorph then has to be dealt with. Tennessee and Daniels deal with the xenomorph, and then once everything's taken care of and you think everything's well and good, it turns out that they don't realize this whole time that this is David pretending to be Walter. And as they're putting him in cryo sleep, only then does Daniels think to ask a question that only Walter would know. And she realizes when it's too late, when she's about to fall asleep, that David has now taken control of the ship. And I was very disappointed at that point. So, you know, I'm sounding really negative. I thought it was an okay movie. It was worth the money. But had I had this kind of inkling that it might have veered off the tracks and gone toward an AI story instead of an alien story in this way, I wouldn't have gone and seen it. And the other thing that really disappointed me is that something I didn't think could be possible turns out to be a major plot point, and that is Ridley Scott decided to go in the direction of making David the architect or creator of that alien xenomorph, of the classic one we see in the early Alien and Aliens movies, which doesn't make sense to me, because when you go back to Prometheus, you see it on the engineers, on the mural, right, in the head room, the room with the big giant head. On the mural there, you see a classic xenomorph along with a couple of face huggers, right? So it doesn't make sense. The timeline doesn't make sense. The fact that David somehow created this perfect being doesn't make sense. It should have already existed. So that was the first thing that kind of threw me for a loop, was the fact that it didn't make sense in terms of the timeline and what we already know about Alien with respect to Prometheus and then this sequel, Alien Covenant. The other thing that, you know, there were just, and those are kind of the major ones. The things that really also bugged me were some of the smaller things. Like, you've got this person, Daniels, who seems very sharp, and she would have been, in my mind, she would have been totally up to speed in terms of the upgrades that had occurred with respect to Walter, and the fact that Walter could heal, you know, that he could heal his own wounds, that he was resilient that way, right? So when she saw, when David poses as Walter and gets his way back onto the main ship, he has this cut on his face that she helps staple together. I looked at that and thought, there's no way. She would have realized right then, hey, what's going on? Walter could heal his own face. And don't forget, there's a scene where, I may not have mentioned this, there's a scene where David actually tries to kill Daniels. So she would have been very wary. You know, Walter and David look identical. She would have been very wary of letting something on the ship that she thought could actually be David and not Walter. It just didn't work for me. It didn't make sense. It was too easy and too convenient. It's one of these things, look, I write science fiction. It's one of these things where you get lazy and you need to get from point A to point B, but there's a gap in between. You just throw up your hands and go, oh, we'll just pretend the characters don't notice. Come on, Ridley, you're better than that. That should not have been that way. And whoever wrote the script, I have no idea who it was. Get better writers. I'm available. Hint. So look, to wrap this up, it barely got 3 stars. It was probably, there are moments where I thought, nah, this is only worth 2 stars instead of 3. But the thing I kept telling myself is, something? These movies that Ridley makes, some of them, the Prometheus one at least, they really grow on you. Right. So although I'm annoyed right now, I did this video purposely without looking online to people who have really started researching this and asking questions and looking into the explanations behind some of the things I just saw on screen. I avoided looking at that because I wanted to give you the unvarnished view of somebody who had just gone to see the movie fresh, without knowing any spoilers, without having looked at possible explanations for what happened, because the average person is going to go in like me, blind, and come out scratching their head going, what the, so that's what happened. The other thing I would say is I've seen reviews where it talks about how, the pacing was off. No, I thought the pacing was perfect. He got that right. In fact, I did get invested in some of the characters. Enough time was spent with them where I really did start to care about some of the characters, and that added to my frustration at the end. To think that here are these characters who were so smart and survivable and, kick ass, and then at the very end they turn dumb and don't notice something that's key, to their survival. I didn't buy it. Now, I will say that they could have made the cast of the crew a little bit smaller. There were a number of characters who you didn't really get to know at all. And if that's what people are talking about in terms of, not getting to know certain characters as much as you wanted to, yeah, well, that is the case. I mean, there were characters that show up and say a few lines and then are gone, right? I mean, and it's not in a way that, red shirts from Star Trek kind of thing. No, it's more like, why was that person even there and on screen? I don't care that person just died, So there was some of that. This, in all, the artwork and the scenery and the filming and everything was fantastic. Perfect Ridley Scott. The script and the storyline did not work. And here's the real thing that bugged me. We learned nothing about the engineers. Nothing. Zero. Nada. I went into this thinking we were going to learn a lot about them, about why David would feel the need to bomb all the engineers. Well, as it turns out, it's just because he's crazy, right? There's no explanation. I did a video here, pew, pew, pew. I can never remember what side. I did a video earlier about how maybe David killed all the engineers because he knew that they had some sort of hatred for artificial intelligence or some fear born out of a past war they had where artificial intelligence almost took over. That would have been brilliant, right? Ridley, I'm telling you, hire me. But no, it just turns out David's crazy. He's kind of like a Napoleonic complex kind of dude. And doesn't like humans at all, and somehow that hatred for humans translates over into hatred of the engineers. That's a load. That was just crap. That's a crappy plot point. I went in there hoping to learn more about the engineers, and learned nothing. So anyway, he did a great job with the filming. Like I said, I thought the plot needed lots of work, even worse than Prometheus. I feel worse about this movie than I did coming out of Prometheus for the first time. But like I said, maybe it'll grow on me. I don't know. I can't recommend this movie. I just can't. So if you're somebody who doesn't mind spoilers and you haven't gone to see the movie yet and you've stuck with this video until the very end where we are now, my recommendation, wait for it to come out on pay-per-view. Wait for it to come out on DVD or whatever and get it out, that way. Because it's not worth the full price of the movie ticket. End transmission. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. Look, now that YouTube is censoring everybody, we all need to work together. So please, click the thumbs up on this video, subscribe to my channel, and do one small thing for me. Share this on social media. Share it on Twitter, Facebook, I don't care which. Every social media thing you're subscribed to. However little you're willing to do, however much. Also consider buying my books. I'm an award-winning author, and you get what you pay for. You'll at least have some enjoyment out of them. I'm not asking for charity. Take a look at my books. All the links are below. Thanks for watching.
Country roads say, take me home.